Hello, and welcome to the Distillery. I'm your host, Harry Lee Shanglun, and today we have guest Amani Naseem, who is a
Hi,
playmaker from Malé in the Maldives. How are you doing, Amani?
I'm good. I'm stuck.
You're stuck? Where are you stuck?
Yeah, I'm stuck in this house. It's the house where I grew up in. It's my grandparents' house. Now my uncle lives here. My parents live here, and um, a few different families. And
And
we are
how are you
not
all
allowed.
doing in
Well,
pandemic?
we're not allowed to go out. We have to SMS the police if we want to go out, and they give us a certain time period that we can go out in. It's
That
kind of
sounds
like
like
the
a pretty strict control method.
yeah. They tried to have a curfew and they tried to have like social distancing, but it was just impossible because in Mali there are about more than 100,000 people living and it's 2.5 square kilometers, so it's really, really crowded. So if people are out on the streets are totally full and you can't really stay far from each other.
And so Malé is the capital of the Maldives, and it's one of the most densely populated areas.
Yeah,
Whereabouts are you in Malé?
I am. I am in the eastern end, not really, but kind of in the middle. It's really small, so really not far from the sea. But
It feels
it's
like that's true of all of the Maldives, that it's not far from the sea.
yeah. I mean, you really can't go far from the sea. But right now, because of the lack of traffic and everything, you can actually smell the sea sometimes when you couldn't. It's all these like narrow, tall houses that are built now, and it's just a concrete island, and everybody's living on top of each other. And
What's the
if
mood
we
over there
all
at the
went out
moment?
on the street, we would have to like stack on top of each other as well.
That's quite an interesting image. Just
Yeah,
everyone vertically stacked. Um,
yeah.
has life changed dramatically? It sounds like, people are having to stay at home. They're not allowed to go outside. What's the mood of your friends and family?
Um, Everyone's quite frustrated because they can't work, right? There's a lot of and a lot of people in my family have been incarcerated in different ways because of politics. So this being stuck in the house is kind of reminiscent. So we do have conversations about jail food and like comparing what it was like to be under house arrest. And this house had this house had people under house arrest for like 5 years continuously, 6 years
Right,
at
various
one
members of your
time when I was
family.
younger.
Hmm.
Yeah. So a lot of the people who are now stuck here in the house have already been under house arrest. So it's like,
Just
there's
house
memories.
arrest round two.
Yeah.
What are the political conditions and what are the specific, I guess, like happenings around those house arrests? It sounds like a pretty intense scenario
Well,
or
we had a
environment.
dictatorship of 30 years. So and then we had and then during the fight for against the dictatorship, it was kind of dangerous. My parents were in exile for a while and living in Sri Lanka. So I'm normally living in Sri Lanka right now, but I came here with my mom to be with my family because of the pandemic. So Sri Lanka is actually, we were living in Sri Lanka because it's kind of more healthy than living in a congested place like Male. But it turned out that for this pandemic, I'm in Mali. So it's kind of funny.
So the thing that you were trying to avoid has now come to pass. And
Yeah.
this
But,
military coup,
Maldives,
dictatorship. Oh, sorry, go on.
like, for like Maldives is, like it's really a brand for tourism, right? And like when I first went to Europe um, for for like to go to school, nobody had really heard about Maldives. But then now everybody knows about Maldives, and and the only reason people know about Maldives is tourism mostly, and some people who have heard about climate change kind of have heard about that because of President Nasheed's underwater parliament and things like that. So we're in
Do you
the
mind quickly
forefront.
explaining what the underwater parliament is and who President Nasheed is?
President Nasheed was the first democratically elected leader in Maldives, um, and he had been struggling against the dictatorship for like together with a lot of other people as well, for like more than 19 years, I suppose. Yeah, and in and out of jail and torture and things like that. And then when he came to power, he set up this underwater cabinet meeting, and not parliament, underwater cabinet meeting, and that was shown, that kind of made the news, and it's a very. I actually saw, my friend in Australia showed me like a postcard that had come in a kid's like fruit snack bag, and it was of the underwater parliament. It was a drawing of it, but for some reason there was this white woman sitting next to President Nasheed in this picture. It's really strange as well.
Hmm. And so this was a, kind of provocative, very artistically and aesthetically led statement where he invited the cabinet to take place underwater as everyone was wearing diving suits and people were holding up signs. It's kind of
Yeah,
a type of protest or a kind of political artwork as well, right? And
yeah. It
this
was
is,
it was the year of COP. I think it was just before that, like the Copenhagen meeting where he was there. Um, so it really became like a pop image. I think it was pretty effective like that to show that we'll be underwater, that we are in
I like
danger.
that. Yeah, it speaks to the role of art in these conversations and the capacity for strong images to generate discourse to enter our minds and linger in that way and hopefully change our hearts. But it's also pretty dramatic that the democratically elected leader would be the person to enact this art piece. Is President Nasheed known for these kind of playful activisms of this nature?
Yeah, I think so. Like in Maldives, among um, you know, he changed the way that political leaders are seen, I think, and some people emulate, running around, like jumping from place to place, and even just being like really active and not like trying to be like some grand person who's just like standing there and being grand, like that kind of thing. And
Mm.
this in February this year, um, my sister has something called the Maldives Coral Institute, um, where they're working to save Maldives corals, and because there's a lot of things happening that are really really stressing the corals right now. Like right now, there's a huge bleaching event, and the ocean temperatures are rising. So they're trying to figure out how to not kind of how for us not to melt into the ocean, because the corals will like wash away if they die. Um,
Mm.
and then our sand will also go, and then of course that's so she has this institute together with President Nasheed, the co-founders, and this February I made this. I helped to organize um, these workshops and a festival for the Maldives Coral Institute in an island. And there as well, it was really interesting to see President Nasheed going around and gathering people. There were people from, there were like school kids, there were international scientists, and um, there were cabinet ministers and policy people and local island people and some tourists as well. And so and university students and NGO people, all kinds of people, surfers and divers, and on the beach. And then so he was just running around creating conversations and gathering people and getting new people to talk, like making a more an open kind of discussion place where all kinds of people could interact together. Where it wasn't, like trying to break the barriers that would normally allow people to talk to like these powerful people.
Yeah, I
That
like that.
kind of thing. So I
It
think
seems
that's
to
really
be.
like a talent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a skill that I think you've identified is something, not just bringing a particular energy and doing particular tasks, but also even the physicality of how you use your body. And you're saying he doesn't try to hold himself in a way that is aloof or I am better than you. He's running around and he's encouraging people to do these very mundane and human actions. And I want to get back to that because I think it relates very much to your work around the body and how the the ways in which we use our body in awkward or regal ways can affect the way that we move around the world and move around society. But before that, I wanted to also allude to, I mean, not just this work that you've done with the Choral Institute, but also other artistic events that you've hosted and run that tend to be very playful, whether it's Playmakers in the Maldives or the Exodus Caravan show. Can you tell us more about the work that you've done that combines play and activism?
I think the Exodus Caravan show was created because my husband Soren Dalgard, he was setting up the Maldives Pavilion in 2013, and we were kind of doing it, without letting the government of Maldives know, because we had got the job from President Nasheed's government that had been couped, and there was this authoritarian dictatorship that were like stopping any free speech, and they wouldn't have supported us. But then the curators who were working with Soren decided to come secretly to Maldives and then coup us, like tell the dictatorship government about it, and then take control. Like
Whoa.
so then we had to make the Maldives Exodus Caravan show, and that's what the Soren made, and that has been around all over. So and
So it's like a miniature
I had
exile.
yeah. So a lot of the artists went with Soren, but then a lot of the people, I think maybe the people who are mostly there, just because it was good to be in a pavilion, they kind of stayed with the Maldives Pavilion. Um, not very cool people, I think. And so but then the Playmakers was something that was supposed to be that was made to be part of the pavilion show, and a lot of us were, and I had invited people that I had been working with in Europe and people that I hadn't yet been working with from America and other places to come and make games in Maldives, that we could then go and show over there in Venice somehow. And also, like, it was supposed to be kind of a collaboration with Maldivian artists as well. But after it was coup, it was kind of hard to, after the pavilion, after the coup, after the many coups, it was dangerous to, it was kind of dangerous to be here, but we decided to come here anyway and try and do whatever we could. And, at that time when we came here, we could only be legally 3 people on the streets and not
Right, because
more.
any more is considered a protest or an illegal gathering.
Yeah,
So what was it
yeah.
like creating work in those
So,
conditions?
so we had to, we had to kind of be a little undercover about it, uh, and then the way that we got permission was also, so the people who supported us and helped us, they were people who weren't scared or who were already used to be doing activist things, and who kind of knew how to, and people who, trust was really important, of course. And so the way that we got permission to do our final event, which was kind of like a party outside by the beach at the surf point, um, was to get an international curator who was here to go and call it an art exhibition. So it couldn't be a party or a play event. Or it was really important how we framed it, and it was really
Mm.
important whose face was doing it, right? Because if it was me who was going to try and get this permission, it would be harder because that government had already cooled our pavilion, like.
It reminds me of like a high stakes version of what a lot of people face when they do grant applications, where they have to transform their project into like, oh, this isn't a game, this is art, or this isn't art, this is play, or the words that you use make it more or less favorable to the authorities that grant you permission to do it, and so you
Yeah,
have to be a bit sneaky and willing to transform yourself to get away with it. What do you
yeah.
think the perception and role of like games as a label and art as a label have? Like, what do those labels do to the thing, particularly in your context in the Maldives? Like, is one seen as more favorable than the other?
Now I think it's more common to have games events because of esports, and so games are more common, but it's also kind of strange. But in Maldives there are many cultures. There's a lot of people. It's really crowded, and there's also like a lot of differences between generations, and there's a lot of different groups doing different types of culture, and the different and many cultural influences from around the world. So they're like really extreme, kind of extremist Islam people, and there's also the other extreme, um, and there's like a lot of Bollywood culture, and there's a lot of now like influences from Korea and Japan, and as well, and Western culture. So it's like, so there's a lot of mix, and there's a lot of exploring kind of in small corners, but there's no like big government support for arts, so it's it's difficult for these different sides to express, to like be seen.
Mm. I think it's
Another
really
thing I
encouraging that you've
yeah
managed to do things in a sneaky way without necessary permission or an invitation, but because you think that it's really an important thing to do. That's very I don't know. It's very inspiring.
I was thinking about what you said about getting the funding and getting permission, um, and so like you've been running festivals in Australia as well, and you kind of have to seem like a certain type of, you have to be a certain type of festival maybe to get the support.
There's all
um
this invisible work in, I mean, not just festivals, but any event, in in trying to present it properly to the right person. I think. In
Yeah.
2013, I co-directed Free Play, which is Australia's independent games festival, largest and longest running event of its kind here. And yeah, it was really tricky. I wasn't very good at it back then, and I'm still learning how to navigate bureaucracy and how to uh, deal with funding bodies and grant applications. It's not my forte. It's a skill that has to be practiced and learned, and it's one that actually changes the object, I think, right? Like you start to use vocabulary in a particular way, then through talking about it in a way, it becomes something different. Um, I don't know whether that's something that you've experienced in your events, though.
I think the free play was really cool because I was able to like my big question was why in like I'd been used to being part of organizing stuff in Europe, in Denmark, and like in Denmark when I'm walking on the road I look really different, and like you know I've constantly being like noticed because I look really different from everyone else and everyone else looks really similar. And but in Australia, when I moved to Australia in 2013, I realized that everybody is different. Like in Melbourne, you're walking on the streets and there are people from everywhere there, so it's like really kind of comfortable um, in that way. And and then but then all the events and the culture was still like just really looking at Europe and America, and then you couldn't see that Australia has an Aboriginal, it's an Aboriginal country, and so my question for the next free play, not the one that you were doing, but for the next free play, I wanted to ask like, what does it mean to be making work here in Australia that is so mixed and that is also um, a stolen, a colonized country.
Mm.
So in free play, I was able to do that. At first, I didn't really know, but also I didn't really know how to phrase it. I had to kind of, and it was, and over the 2 times that I did it, it kind of changed as well. And then, but it was really something that made me learn a lot because of the people that I found while trying to do it, trying to get people to come and talk about this conversation, because and there was and I couldn't find people in games really who were having that conversation at the time, so I had to find people from outside, from other cultural things like um, writers and musicians, and people from different backgrounds.
Right. And so it sounds like something you're particularly adept in, whether it's tackling like how do you create an event that decolonizes or that centers First Nations voices or people of color. Um, and then your the thing that you're looking at maybe is too small or not focused on that, so you start to cast your net wider. You start looking at the ability to pull people in from other spheres to achieve that effect in the local, and that mirrors, it sounds like to me, like it mirrors the things that you were doing in the Maldives, where you're saying, well, actually we can use the face of this international curator to secretly do our sneaky playful event, which wouldn't ordinarily be possible in the conditions of the local. So it sounds like you're really good at sneakily changing any local context, which is great. Like that's a very valuable skill.
Uh,
Although I don't
I
know if
don't
you
know. I
frame it that
don't.
way.
I'm not doing it. Yeah, I don't know if it's like deliberately being sneaky about it. Maybe if I was more deliberately sneaky about it, I would be better at it. Maybe
Yeah,
or
got
more
to practice our
effective.
covert. Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah,
with playmakers,
there's a balance to be struck.
we just really had to. We didn't really know what it would be like because we knew that the curator who had taken over had it was here at the same time as we were. So we were just seeing this guy everywhere and paranoid about bumping into him. And also, we didn't know how dangerous exactly it would be, because that would depend on the situation on the streets at the time and whatever rallies or whatever was going on. So we really had to um, just and not organize. So like a way of doing it without being too frustrated was to not be organized in a way. And
Mm.
but then, I think that there are people who are really good at these kind of things, who actually can be organized about going and doing that kind of sneaky stuff and infiltrating. But no, I'm not. Yeah,
I think
I would
whatever
like to
your preferred
learn a little bit more about those things, I think.
whatever the preferred style of organization, which includes, I think, not organizing too strongly. Um, what strikes me is that you have a consciousness of the political context of your work, of the geographic context of where you're performing or doing your experience,
Yeah.
and making a very clear offer to whom are you approaching and who are you including in this exercise. I would like to circle back to the point that I said that I'd pick up later as a last question, which is your game design often involves awkward bodies and strange positions. So you've made a game called Magnetize Me, as well as Get My Digits, as well as Jelly Stomp, and all of these games involve strange and interesting body interactions. Why do you like that, and what is it about awkward bodies that makes for such compelling game design?
I don't know why I like it. Why I like putting people in awkward situations. But that Get My Digits one is also like, it was awkward because mostly because it was also, you had to like really jump around and dance to play it. But also it was um, kind of, yeah, like pushing that context that we were in, because we were in a game jam context at an HCI conference. So
Oh,
nobody
you mean
really,
computer interaction conference?
yeah. And, it's very academic, and people are also like quite grand, and, um, not relaxed in their bodies so much, I would say. Um, and so like nobody played it when we took it to the show, after the place where we were showing all our games that came out of the game jam. It was really hard to get people to play it, and I don't think anyone played it. So
But
it
that's
was
in stark
awkward
contrast
because of the
to
context.
right. I
Um,
see. So it's like people who are very concerned about their image and concerned about the way that they use their body in a visibly appropriate way, so to speak. But you've
yeah,
also shown games where people definitely don't have that, and they're fully, in Magnetize Me, for example, people are having to touch magnets on limbs together and shake them up and down, so you end up in this weird, sweaty, sprawling mess with another player as you collaborate in a
yeah,
dance.
yeah.
Uh,
So that really fit nicely with places like Roskilde Festival, where we showed it, and people came back to play it with their friends, and so that kind of space works really well. But it's still awkward because it's hard to do. Like, you have to twist your body in different ways in order to play it. Jelly
mm,
Stomp was something that came out of the Playmakers when we were here, and like all these projects that I do are collaborations with different people. I don't. I think it's really important to do things with people. I don't like doing things so much by myself. To make things. And also, like lately, I've also been thinking that when you are trying to understand cultures, it's really important to do it collectively as well. I haven't really thought about how to talk about it so much, but I've been trying to get people together in Maldives, because now I'm here. Um, different artists and different people to start talking about what we are. Like right now is a really interesting moment because no tourists can come to Maldives because Maldives is has gets most of its money from tourism, and also its identity is in the in the international scene. Maldives identity is really much to do with tourism, and also it is what has been pushing arts and culture a lot. So like there's like different aspects of it. There's like the local TV and local culture, and there's not much consumption of art things like in like painting, that kind of thing. But everybody does it. Like everybody's doing it, but there's not so much support for doing it.
Mm.
But it's changing. It's changed a lot since I was younger. Um,
That's
but a
brilliant.
lot of
I
that
hope
is
that it
because of
continues.
tourism as well.
Right. Yeah.
So like so I'm trying to like get people to talk about like who are we if we don't have without this tourism thing. So I think it's like um, a good time to think about it as well because we just
Mm.
don't have tourists here right now. So if we are doing things, we have to do it without tourists. And we don't know how long it's going to be. But even to try and get out of the pandemic situation, one of the first things that's been done is um, that the government is trying to figure out how to get the tourists back.
Right.
So
But I
they have
guess
open
you're
proposals for
interested.
how to open up resorts. That's one of the first things that they're doing.
So this approach that you're taking of understanding culture, of developing what I sometimes call a national voice. I think that's a fraught term as well, but like for want of a better explanation of how do we define ourselves? You're saying as Maldivians,
Yeah, this is just like
will we
really
develop our arts and
small.
culture? Hmm.
Yeah, this is just a really small group of people that I am connected to. Like there are so many, like I was saying, there's so many different groups of people doing very different things from different angles and with different influences. Like in
Hmm.
Maldives, there are lots of different art cultures.
Yeah, and that's exciting because that demonstrates it's not a monoculture. It's a thriving ecosystem of people who want slightly different things, who have their own ideas, and hopefully
Yeah,
something really beautiful can come out of the synthesis.
well, I hope that it can be allowed to have lots of different, types of things and support.
Mm.
They get support. Because in a small place like that, it's also hard to do that. Like the things that are allowed and that are promoted are very much to do with tourism still. And that's like
Amani,
Western, as well.
right? Yeah, yeah. It's very much you gain power and influence from the tourism which comes from the West. Thank you so much for your time. We've gone a little overtime, so I'm sorry for taking a little long, but it's been a brilliant conversation. I've really enjoyed being able to chat about politics and activism and art and playfulness with you. It's been really wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me, and thank you for letting me do all that stuff with you in Australia too.
Oh, great pleasure.
Bye.
I'm just typing in. You can reach Amani at her Twitter. Is that right? At
Yeah,
Amani Naseem.
and my Instagram. Yeah,
Instagram as well on the same
yeah,
tag. Brilliant.
yeah. No,
All
but
right,
it's
take care.
Amani.Naseem for the Instagram.
Oh, is
Sorry.
it? Okay,
Yeah,
hang on. Let's fix that.
yeah. I
Instagram,
lost access
Amani.
to my old one.
Boom. Instagram at amani.naseem.
Yeah,
Fantastic. Thank you once again and take care.
yeah. Talk
Hope
soon.
that, yeah, you're well in the pandemic. You are listening/watching to The Distillery. Thanks so much for tuning in. And we are back on live stream starting tomorrow. So do join us. You can find us online at distillery.site or on Instagram at distillery.site or on Twitter at distillery site. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.